Hello and welcome to lesson 18 of the Learning Guitar series. Originally for this lesson I had planned to discuss minor chords, minor arpeggios and minor scales. So to introduce the concept of Doren in this case. So far we studied major and Ionian in particular, so the first degree, what we discussed in lesson 16 when it comes to harmony and theory. And I'm going to do that in the next lesson. So we're going to discuss these things. So we're going to introduce the minor and, do a bunch of things about that. But I thought actually for this lesson to first add a level of musicality to this series. And what I mean by that is to discuss playing, literally playing, how we can apply in a musical way everything that we've done so far. And if you remember in lesson 1, I kind of defined the process starting from an alphabet, so A, B, C, and I defined that as, you're learning a scale or you're learning an arpeggio, okay? Or you're learning like a basic chord. And then I defined as words basically like what derives from all the exercises we've been doing. So words are those studies that you've done in terms of interval of thirds, triads, extended triads, groupings, when it came to arpeggios, different way of executing those arpeggios, etc. And then I kind of put like alphabet, words, and then phrases, okay? And so, the words are what helps you in building phrases. And I think it's a good time to start discussing phrasing when it comes to music. And the fact that we more often than not use language, spoken language, as synonymous in between music and spoken language is kind of a useful one for certain aspects. And for other aspects, we can highlight what the differences are. When it comes to phrasing, and bear in mind, you can start from, you can approach this from an improvising point of view, and you can approach this also like by studying licks. I know that a lot of musicians tend to study licks from other musicians as a starting point. So we're going to discuss phrasing and two approaches that you can have to it. There are many, but let's start from these two and discuss them quickly, and then I'll show them to you on a guitar. And by the way, I also devised a backing track that you can probably you can use as a play along, and I'll upload it probably as a separate video, just as a play along kind of thing. So two concepts. The first one is the concept of repetition. Now, this is where music kind of differs from spoken language. What I mean by that is like when we're having a discussion, when you're talking to somebody, like I am right now in a way, I don't have to repeat the same exact phrase over and over, even with slightly differences. So let's say I want to tell you that the sun is shining. I'll just say the sun is shining. I'm not going to go, the sun is shining, shining is the sun, is the sun shining? I'm not going to just change this thing. It's enough that I say it once, and then I oh, sorry, that's my phone. And then I can move on to evolve in this conversation. The sun is shining. Why don't we go out for a walk? Why don't we buy an ice cream? These are all phrases that once you put them together, establish like a concept. In music, it doesn't necessarily work that way. Okay, that's one of the main differences. What I mean is, sometimes the repetition allows your audience, so who's listening to kind of understand where you're going with that concept. And in that sense, it seems to me that some people that study licks sometimes misses the point in terms of developing the licks and not leave it as it is. So in terms of guitar soloing, what you end up with is a lick and then another lick and then another lick and then another lick. And if you want to compare that to spoken language, it's a bit like me saying, the sun is shining, oh, look at a cat, can I have a coffee? Three very different kinds that when you hear them one after the other, kind of makes no sense, okay? Instead, the development of that idea would be, the sun is shining, why don't we go for a walk and maybe let's have an ice cream, okay? So in musical terms, let me demonstrate that to you. Let's take a very simple fragment of a phrase, I don't know, okay? 3 notes, very, very simple, okay? And if I start repeating this, and by repeating I don't mean, I mean developing that little idea. So what's the next line? I bet you know it. Something along the ba ba ba. The fact that you can predict it. So I'll do it again. There you go. So the fact that as a listener right now, you can kind of see where I'm going with it allows you to understand what I'm doing. In terms of speaking, it's a bit like you understanding what I'm saying. Okay, so in that sense, music is slightly different from language, because in language you don't have to repeat the same thing over and over for the concept to get across. While in music, it does help the audience to follow where you're going with it. Okay. And so the same idea you can apply it to a lick, and I'm going to use a very surreal example in this case. I'm going to take a piece of melody from a well-known Katy Perry song, okay, which is Fireworks. And the reason I'm taking that, I suppose I could take it like, maybe a lick from, Stevie Ray Vaughan, or it just then, I'm exaggerating this idea so you get the concept. So let's take that melody, for example, right? Something like that, right? Now, I'm going to treat that as a lick, okay? Like a fragment. And I'm just going to move it around by using repetition. So you see where I'm going with that. Not only you can hear that particular idea, whatever that melody, moving around, moving into other places. So... Now, you see, I hope you understand what I'm saying. In this case, I'm improvising it, and the idea behind improvising is still the kind of rules apply. This idea of using repetition as a way to give your audience an understanding of where you're going with that, but also from your perspective, you're building when you're having a conversation about a specific topic, all the conversation is about that topic. Is kind of evolving, okay? And as a professional musician, one thing you're tackling, saying if you're playing 12 songs in a set, and maybe you have a guitar solo on each of those songs, if you don't learn how to develop small ideas into a bigger concept, what happens is in 12 songs, you're always going, when it comes to the solo, you're just playing the same thing over and over. Which makes it boring probably for you, and to somehow maybe not very interesting for the audience you're playing to. So you might have a question like, okay, but what about if I don't have a starting point, okay? And that's when like the idea of studying other people's licks might come handy, or even better, if you're playing songs, no matter if they are rock songs or blues songs or jazz tunes, whatever they are. They all contain a melody. In a way, I just did it. Imagine like I'm playing a gig and, we are performing Fireworks by Katy Perry, but we're doing it in a way that there is a guitar solo. Well, the melody of the song is an excellent starting point to see where that can go, right? And this kind of idea applies not only if you're improvising a solo, but even if you're writing a solo. So if you're planning it, literally, a good starting point is always, what's the melody of the song? Because in that sense, you are actually giving great service to the song itself. What's the point of having this has a melody in the lyrics, and then suddenly there is a solo, and you go. That just made no sense. I mean, with whatever the song was. So it's a bit like we're having a discussion, and the sun is shining. Oh, look at the cat. Okay. So the concept of repetition, although not so common in the spoken language, can be very common, can be very useful to our musical language. So even if you study, by starting from somebody else's lick, learn how to develop it. And in this case, it's good that you're doing it all over one single chord. In this case, I'm only using G major, by the way. And so scales, arpeggios, whatever. So you're doing it over one chord, so you don't have to negotiate necessarily chord changes or key changes, etc. So try and develop any idea, and you can use as fragment, some of the intervals you studied. It can be anything, really. It can be a rhythmic idea. Gonna go and see what happens. Okay. Okay, sorry, I took my time, Another concept, so the first one, repetition. Another concept that you can apply and actually combine with this, it really gives you a way to expand. So you can take an idea and that idea generates the next idea, that generates the next idea, that generates the next idea, and suddenly you have an entire solo. So an entire discussion, like a 1 minute solo, a 4 minute solo, whatever space you have. Is the concept of question and answer, or we can define it as tension resolution if you want. It's to me, I see them as a very similar concept. The best way to understand what I mean by question and answer and tension resolution is by looking at the blues, in particular the way lyrics are delivered when somebody's singing the blues. Now, I'm not a singer, so feel free to make fun of me for doing this, but and I'm making up words, okay? I woke up this morning and I feel like I want a coffee. I woke up this morning and I feel like having a coffee. I woke up this morning and I feel like having a coffee, but don't put sugar in it. Okay? It's the most ridiculous blues stanza you probably ever heard. But I guess, I hope it will explain the point of, I woke up this morning, question, and I feel like having a coffee. Resolve that. Repetition. I woke up this morning and I feel like having a coffee. Tension. And now conclusion. I woke up this morning, I feel like having a coffee, but please don't put sugar in it. Dot. That's the end of it. Now, if I take that last phrase, please don't put sugar in it, because I like it bitter. Please don't put sugar in it, because I like it bitter. Please don't put sugar in it, because I like it bitter, and I like it better that way. Okay, now I have my second stanza. Now, a blues would not work that way in terms of taking the last phrase and make it the beginning of the new stanza. But when we're phrasing on a guitar, that actually can be a very useful concept, because I can take, again, the concept of repetition first. So, now this last phrase I just played is the equivalent of that resolution. So, pa 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 da ba da da da. Now this last line, da 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 da, can be the beginning of my next idea, my next stanza. Now I can start and multiply and develop the second idea. Now, of course, in this case, I took the first idea and I ran it for, 1 or 2 bars. I could run that for much longer until I feel like resolving that idea. So I had a question and I'm answering that first idea. Once I answer that first idea, that answer becomes the question for the next one. Okay? Right now I'm going to keep them short. So like I did before when I was improvising, there was a lot of question and answer happening there. So, I don't know. That's the answer. Tension. Answer. And now becomes the next. Tension. Answer. And then tension. Answer. Tension. Answer. And developing this now. Now you see how these two concepts kind of allows you to start somewhere and you're leading yourself to the next thing, and then you're leading yourself to the next thing, and then you're leading yourself to the next thing. And now you have an entire one single fragment developed into a guitar solo. In this case, I like improvising this. But as I said before, you can plan a guitar solo starting from the same concept. And, the very first fragment can be whatever melody is going on in the song itself, or, literally anything. I think one of the main differences when it comes to writing a guitar solo as opposed to improvising, in writing it, you can really plan ahead also maybe some of the techniques you want to put into that particular solo. It's not unusual maybe like to start a solo, let's say, slow with very few sparse notes and then build up in terms of speed. There is many ways in terms of approaching that, and they really also depend on the genre, music, etc., or how you want to express yourself. But as I'm sure that for as long as you you apply maybe some of these concepts, this idea of repeating, of repetition, and this idea of a question and answer, eventually your playing develops into phrasing, and that's the entire point, like of calling it phrasing, okay, as opposed to disconnected kind of stuff, As you can see, like just because they are so different from each other, this little fragment, they don't develop into something that feels musical. Okay, and if it's not musical for you, it's not going to be musical for your audience. Okay, instead, something that has a motion to it and a sense of finish end of the first fragment, but now this and another example, when you hear maybe like more applied to rock and metal, like that kind of runs, so-called runs. Okay, this kind of ideas. I mean, like this, the fact that there is a repetition, and the repetition is in 3 notes per string kind of thing. It helps you as a listener. Okay, where is that going? Okay. And okay, so what you want to do next is, if you have a loop pedal or something, just have a chord in the background. What I'm gonna do for you, I prepared a backing track, and I'm gonna show it to you in a second. How that works. It's just like a single chord, in this case G, and actually I will also upload it eventually as a separate video, some sort of play along that you can use, independently from this particular lesson. And as a vote for the advanced supporters on Patreon, I also created the same backing track in 12 different keys, so that maybe one day you practice in the key of G, and maybe the day after you still have a backing track, and you can download it as an MP3, and you work this out in E flat. Now, one last question you might have is like, what's the point of playing over one single chord when not many songs are written that way? Well, as I said, at this stage we're wrapping up everything we've done in these first 17 lessons and give it a musicality, okay? And limiting ourselves, to try and explore what we theoretically know so far and create music out of it, it's already a step forward. The next step, once we add minors, so like lesson 19 and Dorian, and then Mixolydian and all the other chords, we will create exercises and maybe backing tracks that allow that to go maybe from major to minor. All these kind of ideas. At this stage, I think it's good to have a musicality and use what we learned, triads. Using triads as a form of, as a word that then develops into a phrase. Check this out. Or intervals. No, please. Okay, so you can always start from like, just an interval, like maybe thirds, and make them into musical lines. Or as I said, start from a lick and develop that, use repetition and all those kind of stuff. Okay, let's have a look. I'm gonna put the backing track on and play along with that to show you how that works. And as I said, I'm gonna upload that backing track as a separate video, as some sort of play along. And if you're an advanced supporter on Patreon, make sure you check on Patreon, as I will upload the same backing track but in 12 different keys for you to download as an MP3. As always, it's been a pleasure. I hope you enjoyed the lesson. If you have any question, feel free to leave it in the comment, and I'll try and address it as soon as I have time. And as I mentioned it before, I don't want to mention it maybe all the time, but if you feel like supporting this project and what I'm trying to do here, there is an option to do that on Patreon. There is different tiers for those familiar with the concept. So if you feel like supporting the project, it's very much appreciated. And if you cannot, given the overall circumstances, what's going on right now, COVID and all that, don't worry about that. Enjoy the lessons, and I hope they are useful in you expanding your understanding of the guitar, and simply enjoy yourself. Okay, it's been a pleasure. Bye. Mm-hmm.